Hey, Daniel from the Southwest Florida Real Estate Channel. So this is process overview. Seller, first thing and most important thing for this seller is you got to get this thing priced right. So, if you get the price right, everything else works. If you don't get the price right, nothing else works. So you got to get this thing priced right. In the current market, this is late 2005, there's a relatively big gap. Statistically across the country, sellers are off by 2.5% in value, which is a really big gap. That means, it's worth $97,500, and the seller thinks it's worth $100,000. Take that. What if it's what if it's $500,000, and that's what you think it's worth, but it's really worth whatever the number would be, $485. So that's a pretty big gap, 2.5% between what it's really worth and what the seller thinks it's worth. The way to solve this really for your seller is you need to be able to take the value and stick it into two categories. You got category number one. Category number one is things that add value. Okay, so things that add value are things, think about squares. Okay, so bedrooms, baths, square footage, overall condition, lot location. Those things are what add intrinsic value. Then there's a whole different category of things that, and I got to be clear with you sellers, a lot of people think it adds value, but really it doesn't add any or maybe a lot of value. And so this is a category of things that make it easier to sell, but that doesn't mean that it makes the sale price necessarily go up. And if you have to get an appraisal, you're going to end up with problems with these items because the price is going to be too high. It's not going to appraise. But these are things like paint, carpeting, new floors in general, and a garage. Zero garage versus a one-car garage, you might find a little bit of value there. But a one-car versus a two or three-car, you're probably not going to find hardly any, if any, value in that. So that means on the open market, and it certainly means in the appraisal. Overall condition, if you change the whole condition of the whole building, there's value there. But if you change condition of just part of the building, there's usually not any or almost no value there. So if all you do is update the kitchen, who likes to convince people that updating a kitchen adds value? People selling kitchens. So siding, same thing. So I know I might be flying in the face of some of your beliefs, but this is 14 years of experience, as well as being really friendly with lots of appraisers, and that is the fact. Is that value is not necessarily the same as things that make it easier to sell. So you might have a real estate professional that says to you, you got to put new carpets in. That doesn't mean you spent $5,000 on a carpet, and now that means your value went up by $5,000. It doesn't necessarily mean that at all. So those are separate things. So that's the biggest thing, and that's the biggest obstacle, frankly, that listing agents have is getting that thing priced the right way. And for some of them, a big obstacle that they have is figuring out what it's worth, because a lot of real estate agents out there don't necessarily know what actually adds value. So it's easy to just kind of talk. It's to people who don't really know professionally what adds value or what an appraiser is going to say, and they just kind of come up with something. Then 6 months later, we go, why is this thing still sitting on the market? It's not priced right. So that's a big part of it. You get the thing priced right. If you've got a real estate professional who really knows what they're doing, they'll have a relatively tight range in what they think the value is. They'll have good comparables. Comparables come in different categories: sold, active, expired, canceled. And then you get the thing in the market. Your real estate professional get a sign stuck in the front lawn. They might have some open houses. They put it on the multiple listing service. They offer a buy-side commission. Pretty standard in Florida, half of it. If you sign a 6% listing, you can expect that your listing agent's probably going to give about 3% of that away to whoever brings them a buyer. You may find that if you got a 5% listing, you might only be giving 2.5% to whoever brings them a buyer, which of course is changes the market and how much other agents want to show that property and whatever. So that's that. So you get some showings, you receive an offer. When you get that offer, you can accept it, reject it, or reject it and counter it. You've got fair housing law involved here. We cannot discriminate against a buyer for race, religion, color, sex, national origin, familial status, or handicap, disability. All other types of discrimination are perfectly legal. Let me say that again. Most types of discrimination are legal. So if you don't like somebody's attitude, if you don't like somebody's demeanor, if you don't like somebody's offer, if you don't like somebody's style of financing, you don't like their FHA or their VA loan, there is no law barring you from discriminating for those things. You've got every right as a seller to say, I'm not selling it to you. This is a full price offer, but I'm not selling it to you because it's an FHA loan and I don't want the federal government involved in my transaction. And so that's those are the criteria. If you accept an offer, that offer has got to be communicated. You have to, in the state of Florida, you're required, the real estate professional is required by law to communicate the acceptance back to the buyer within a day. Within 1 day, you got 1 day. Statute actually says immediately, and that has been construed in courts as 1 business day, okay? So if you accept an offer on Monday, your real estate professional is required to get that offer to the other side and notify them about that by Tuesday. All right, so we're in a contract. The listing agent here should be making sure that the buyer's agent is doing all the things that they're supposed to do. Get a copy of the contract to the title company, get a copy of the contract to the lender so we can order the appraisal. We got to start removing contingencies, so we got to order a home inspection if there's one. We got to make sure that the buyer's agent is making sure there's going to be flood insurance if you need it. There's FEMA requirements for that, especially here when you get out on the beaches and stuff. So make sure that your buyer's agent knows what they're doing. Also make sure that the lender knows what they're doing related to that. If you've got some loan coming from Chicago, and you know, this is a thing out on the beach, you don't want to have some Chicago lender, you know, show up on the day of closing, and they won't show up either. It'll just be a phone call, and they go, "What's this thing about a certificate? You know, I need a survey of the lot line so I can, you know, issue insurance." And then they have no idea about it because they've never done it before. It's just it becomes an issue. So as a seller, you got to make sure that the buyer's got a loan. If there is a loan, make sure that the buyer's lender knows what's going on related to the FEMA requirements as far as how high a building's got to be, and you know what the ramifications are if they're not up to that height. So anyway, so that's all that. You remove the contingencies, you get to the closing. You can choose your own title company or attorney to do the closing. You write up the deed, get it signed. One thing here is that there are some types of properties where you might have to have a non-owner sign. If you own a property all by yourself, even if you're married, and you're not living there, if it's not a marital property, it's not your homestead, you can sell that property with just one signature. But if it's your homesteaded property, even if your spouse doesn't own it, state of Florida requires that your spouse sign that deed in order to transfer the ownership. Let me say that again. If you own a property, what's called in severalty, all by yourself, and you're married, and your spouse is living there. How do you know your spouse is living there? It's homesteaded. The county has homesteaded this. You've homesteaded this property of the county. If that's the case, you're required by Florida law to get your spouse to sign that deed in order to have a valid deed. Now, if you own a property that's an apartment and it's in your name only, your spouse doesn't have to sign. But if this is your primary residence, evidenced by homesteading it at the county, you're going to have to get your spouse's signature on that deed, even if your spouse does not own that property. So that's it. Make sure that your buyer signs the mortgage and whatever, and that's it. You get a check cut to you, so hopefully you got a bunch of good equity in there, and you walk away with a whole big pile of cash after that closing. And that is the whole process for the seller.